Ooh, it looks like I was muted. So I'm going to re-say that in case you didn't hear me. My name is Tammy Workman-Lopez. My company is Sparks Hope. And I'm going to be answering some questions that I got regarding grief and loss. I'm doing a current group now called Finding Your Joy in the Midst of Grief and Loss. And I'll be doing it again in January. And I know those of you who are interested, you're like, oh, let me know. I didn't know there was this one. So I'm letting you know now. It's starting in January. So I do want to hear from you. If you have any questions, we'll just set up a time, go over questions, make sure it's a good fit for you. It's going to get started on the 18th of January, just so you have that idea in mind. Anyways, we're going to take a look at some things because sometimes grief is not what it seems, right? And so I want to give you some tips and tools. And as you're hearing these things, if it's bringing up questions, bringing up concerns, bringing up, I agree with that, I don't agree with that, that's perfectly fine. The way you think and feel, first of all, give yourself permission to know that it's all fine, right? Some of it may be without meaning to, being increased and being expanded upon to make you feel even worse. And some of it is just a natural giving yourself that time to be able to get it out. And then you're going to feel better, right? Now, the experience around grief, there are some things that we're never going to get over, right? But it doesn't mean that we're always going to be in the midst of the same level of grief around it. I myself have been through grief my whole life, right? Most of us have. There's so many different things going on that create a level of grief, but in most instances, it's just a little, right? Things that you hear on the news, things that happen when family members pass. It can take us from just a regular to spiked. It could take us from feeling it a little to feeling it all the time. So this is all natural. So that's the very number one thing I wanted to remind you of, because oftentimes you may find yourself, and this is where, without meaning to, you're creating a negative programming. Asking yourself questions like, oh, what's wrong with me? When is this going to get over? Why does it feel like this? Why does, and then fill in the blank. When you're asking why, in most cases, you're really not looking for an answer. When somebody says, why are you doing that? They're really in the mode of criticizing you because they don't think you should be doing it that way. You're doing the same thing with yourself. So it's really important to be mindful. Sometimes the grief that we have is really as big as it is because we're creating suffering in the midst of that grief. So for example, you have a loss. That's natural grief. However, if you say to yourself, I'm alone, I'm never going to see this person again, I'm never going to hear their voice again, I'm never, all these nevers, it's just heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier. And then there's things that start to happen. You start to find yourself never being able to feel at peace. You start to feel like you're having headaches all the time. You may start to feel like you can't sleep ever. You may feel like you can't ever stop crying. Now, some of this stuff, if there's a recent loss, is 100% natural and normal. And it's very easy to make it worse and to move from grief into suffering. So it's essential to be aware of that line. And your body will tell you, right? So it may seem like, well, I'm grieving, this is natural. But if you are putting all of this negativity in your thinking on you, so for example, if there is someone who matters so much to you in your life and they're not there anymore, that is pain enough. But if now you're saying to yourself, I'm never going to hear them again, I'm never going to see them again, not to say those things aren't true, but what if you shifted instead, you know what, I remember when I heard them say this. Now there's going to be sadness and grief there, but it's going to uplift you into love. It's going to uplift you into the joy of their memory versus squashing their memory. I'll never hear them. I'll never see them. I'll never experience them. So instead of actually allowing yourself to think of their voice, to think of your experience, to think of those memories, to realize this grief is because you love them so much, and because those memories matter so much, and because that relationship is so big and so important, you can allow yourself to be in the midst of grief and yet still have joy that you had that person. It doesn't stop the level of pain that you feel that they're not there, but it does stop the level of making yourself suffer. Now, I hope this is making sense. If it's confusing, ask me questions. If you're not sure, or if you're trying it and it's not working, let me know, right? There's different things that come up that could get in the way. If I'm someone who's used to suffering, and growing up, I was very much used to suffering because my mother always suffered and always punished, right? And so I was used to that. And so whenever I would have these experiences, I automatically dropped into suffering. I automatically dropped into punishment. I automatically dropped into blaming and shaming and like being angry at God and being angry at myself and being angry that I was angry. Being angry, I was being selfish, all these different things. That adds suffering. We can feel anger. It's totally fine to feel anger. Anger says this is unfair and unjust, and death is. Loss of something that's so important to us is, right? Losing our childhood or losing someone that's so important to us, to whatever it is, right? To whether it's divorce or whether they move away or whether they suddenly die or even if it's expected. There's so many variations of grief that we're not even aware of. If you allowed yourself to understand that there's these different stages of grief, and it doesn't mean there's these 5 stages and you have to do this and then this and then that. There's other ideas, like there's 11 stages of grief, there's 12, there's 15. If you allow yourself to see these are the stages of grief, and you're going to be like a pinball. And sometimes something will happen in your life that'll send you through them all over again. And it doesn't make any sense, except when you understand it, it begins to make a lot of sense. Because if you have a grief in your life that's unresolved and a new grief comes up, and it could be something as simple as you're getting married, you're like, that shouldn't be a grief. Well, you're leaving behind your old way of living. You're leaving behind the potential of being independent and on your own, like maybe you used to be. You're leaving behind having only your decision and not having to check with someone else. You're leaving behind these old things, and that's not bad because you're taking on all these other beautiful things, but that is still a loss, a change of the way that life was. And so we'll notice that there's a grief that goes along with it. It could be short and simple, but for some of us, if there's other griefs that are stacked, that when that comes up, that seems so much bigger. When it's only because these other griefs, it's pushing the similarity. So if you think about, if you have a guitar in the room and you have a piano in the room, they vibrate, right? So if you ping the piano and that vibrates, you can actually hear the humming of the strings on the guitar. Same thing if you have another stringed instrument. It's because it resonates. The same thing works with your emotions and your thinking. If a grief happens, it doesn't even seem like a grief. Kids move out, you get married, or legitimately a grief, like you lose someone, or there's a divorce, or you just, a friend moves away. Things that seem like, okay, I could work with this, become so big and so heavy because they're resonating with those other things, and those begin to vibrate as this vibrates. And then all of a sudden you're feeling like, oh my gosh, this is so heavy. I cannot even breathe. My body feels like all of my emotions are waking up and crying out loud. That's because they are. But it's not just because of this moment. It's because of all of the moments of things that are just not quite resolved yet. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. And it doesn't mean you have to go back and relive it. Not at all. It just means that there's some belief, there's some practice that you're doing that unintentionally is keeping that wound from being able to heal. That's it. And so it sounds easy, and actually it is easier than we think, but it does still take work. But the great thing is it doesn't take any more work than the work you're already doing to try to not experience the way things are now, or to try to not let it be so heavy and trying to not feel these particular things. Instead, you can allow yourself to work through them, allow yourself to notice what's the thinking going on. Is there any particular suffering going on? What's the negative thoughts? What's the positive thoughts, without thinking of them as bad or shameful? So if this is sounding like something that really is supportive for you, I'd like for you to allow yourself to think about all of these different areas and all of any questions that have come up with for you. You've just learned about some hidden ideas that people just don't know about. You learned about how that grief could be impacting you. You also learned how you can allow yourself to relieve some of that suffering so you can find your joy even in the midst of grief and loss. And so I hope this information, these ideas, and these tools are very supportive for you, and you can actually begin to practice them. Now, it's not super easy to practice it on your own because you're so much in it. It's like this. That's just the way it is, right? That's why professional athletes have a coach, because their game is here, right? Their game is here. Their game is not here and out there and all the players, like they can't. And so if this sounds like something you'd like to work on, I'm going to be doing the same program I'm doing now, Finding Your Joy in the Midst of Grief and Loss, and I'm going to refresh it in January. And so if this is something you'd like to work on, it's 12 weeks of really allowing yourself to dig deep, and not dig deep into more pain and more grief and more, oh, let me talk about it so I can feel bad. No, it's let me talk about it so I could have these tools. Let me talk about it so I can practice this. Let me share this so I can see that there's others going through these things. Let me take a look at what I am doing so I could see what's working and what's not working. Allowing yourself to really step into it, but feeling safe, stepping into it and connecting to, but how do I feel joy in the midst of this? And it doesn't matter if you've dealt with grief and loss just this second, or you've been dealing with it for years or decades. This allows the process of being able to work through it and step out of it. And I'm not saying you're going to step away from any kind of grief of a loved one or grief of a situation. That's part of you. That's part of your journey. That's part of your experience. That's part of loving. It's not bad. Grief is not bad. There is no bad emotion. It's what we do with it that could be harmful. So again, let me know. That makes sense. That does not make sense. I'd like to learn more. I want to connect with you. I want to do a discovery call with you and see if January is a good fit. See what concerns you have and what support you need. So let me know. Reach out to me. You have my contact information above in the contacts or below in the contacts, depending on the social media platform you are watching. Reach out to me, right? Send me a text message. Send me a DM. Whatever works for you, I'm perfectly fine with that. We get to help you step out of any extraordinary struggles that you're going through with grief. And not because there's something wrong with you, but because you get to feel healthier, you get to feel more relieved, you get to feel connected to your life, to your relationships, even if they're not here, in a loving, supportive way versus a maybe destructive, suffering way. You don't need that. I look forward to hearing from you. I look forward to hearing how this is supporting you, any questions that you have, even if you're like, I totally disagree, let me know. I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to kind of banter, and we can see, right? Because I can learn from you and you can learn from me. So if you're just popping on, please do watch the replay. This is really good stuff. I want you to have this information. I'm here every week answering your questions to make sure you are able to create that mindset reset in your life. And I'm here every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Eastern, but it's on replay, so you can watch it anytime. And please do share this. It seems common sense, but it's not common if somebody hasn't understood it, hasn't heard it before. Get this information out. Help. Join me on my mission to help people feel relieved from any negative thinking, any negative emotions that they may feel like they're burdened down with, because they don't have to do that. I learned that myself in my life, and because of that, it's my mission to share that with others. So you take care of you. Have a wonderful day and big squishy hugs for health. Know that you're appreciated and know that you're loved, whether you like it or not. All right, you guys. Oh, and that's my reminder to let you know you can meet me over at Clubhouse. On Clubhouse Wednesdays, I also do a mindset reset, but we do it spiritually through reading from the book Jesus is Calling. So I'd love to invite you, if that sounds of interest to you, look for Mindset Reset with myself, Brenda, and Miriam, as well as God. All of us joining to make sure you get the support that you need there as well. I'll talk to you soon. See you next Wednesday. Let me know what questions come up, what concerns. If this really supported you, I'd love to know. Hey, Tony, Blessings to you too, my friend. It's good to hear from you. All right, you guys. Big squishy hugs and hearts to you. I appreciate you so much. Bye for now.